Global money movement presents an illusion of speed. We assume capital transfers instantly across borders, but the physical infrastructure is severely bottlenecked. Cross-border transactions rely on legacy correspondent banking, a system where wholesale money physically hops between fragmented, localized intermediary banks to its destination. This diagram shows the disconnect. SWIFT, the messaging network that transmits payment instructions, moves data across the world almost instantly, but the actual movement of capital trails far behind, executing sequentially across these fragmented intermediaries. This architecture forces a systemic mismatch. Modern data transmission moves at the speed of light, while the legacy capital clearing process often lags by days. That latency becomes a critical vulnerability when executing foreign exchange trades for illiquid global currency pairs. These illiquid pairs rarely have direct markets. To complete a trade, the transaction must bridge through a dominant vehicle currency, like the US or Singapore dollar. This map illustrates the required routing. To move from currency A to currency B, the trade is forced through multiple intermediary banking nodes to execute the necessary conversions against the vehicle currency. Because these hops rely on independent localized clearing systems, settlement typically takes 2 days. This is known as T+2 latency, and it creates gaps of exposure where capital is in transit but not yet finalized. The industry standard for mitigating this exposure is payment versus payment, or PVP. PVP ensures that a final transfer in one currency occurs if and only if the final transfer in the other currency takes place. However, legacy vehicle currency routing lacks automated PVP for these illiquid pairs. Participants risk that a counterparty defaults before the second leg of the trade settles. To manage that settlement risk, banks hold massive capital buffers in reserve, creating a drag on liquidity and increasing transaction costs. Project Cedar Phase 2 ex Ubin Plus is an experimental architecture designed by the Federal Reserve Bank of New York and the Monetary Authority of Singapore to solve this exact sequential failure. Eliminating multi-day risk requires transitioning from centralized, asynchronous clearinghouses to a new, automated model. The engineering baseline for this model is political. Sovereign central banks require absolute autonomy. They will not adopt a single, shared global central bank digital currency platform. A CBDC is a digital form of a country's fiat money, and central banks intend to keep their ledgers isolated. Bridging sovereign networks requires overcoming incompatibilities between different software architectures and isolated database ledgers. In this experiment, the technical divide is significant. Project Cedar utilizes a UTXO-based architecture written in Rust, a ledger model where balances are derived from chains of unspent transaction receipts. Meanwhile, Ubin Plus operates on a traditional account-based model written in Java. The mechanism connecting them is the hashed Timelock contract, or HTLC. An HTLC is a cryptographic protocol for conditional payments that relies on mathematical hashes and time-bound constraints to enforce settlement. This diagram maps the resulting macro architecture. 4 distinct parallel networks operate independently without a central coordinating node, mapping currency A, the Singapore dollar, the US dollar, and currency B. Utilizing shared cryptographic primitives allow central banks to bridge their ledgers without ceding authority to a central coordinator. To execute a trade across these isolated ledgers, the HTLC protocol begins with an off-chain information exchange phase. It starts at the destination. The beneficiary generates a cryptographic secret, S, the unique input that satisfies the contract. S runs through an algorithm to create an irreversible hash, H of S. This hash transmits backward along a secure channel, propagating through the intermediaries to the originator. Simultaneously, this channel is used to exchange public claim and reclaim keys between neighboring network nodes. These keys are paired with the pre-image hash at each node along the reverse payment path. This process distributes the same cryptographic condition to every participant in the chain. The security of the system relies on this distribution. Every participant holds the condition, but only the beneficiary holds the secret input required to satisfy it. This off-chain propagation stages the network for synchronized execution without requiring a central authority. Once staged, financial assets enter a committed, conditional state across the multiple isolated ledgers. Moving forward, each pair submits their HTLC. They submit to their respective independent ledgers, effectively placing a cryptographic condition containing the shared hash over the allocated funds at each step. This stages the claim cascade. The beneficiary must initiate the clearing process because they are the only party in possession of the secret. The beneficiary inputs secret S to satisfy the condition on the currency B ledger. Once claimed, S is published permanently to that public blockchain. Intermediary 3 extracts S, using it to satisfy the preceding US dollar ledger, initiating a rapid reverse cascade back to the originator. This cascading execution ensures mathematical atomicity. Either every leg settles, or the entire chain remains in its committed state and eventually reverts. But what if a downstream node experiences a network outage during this high-speed cascade? The system utilizes asymmetric nested time locks as a fail-safe mechanism against hardware or network failure. This timeline shows the mathematical rule. The expiration window for the first node, T3, must be strictly greater than T2, and so on. This decreasing increment ensures upstream nodes always have time to extract the secret before their own inbound commitments expire. If an outage outlasts the time lock, the funds are simply reclaimed by the originator, preventing the loss of principal. By utilizing nested cryptography, the architecture eliminates principal risk, even in degraded network conditions. The transition from theory to validation was captured by performance data generated in the Cedar x Ubin Plus test environment. This table tracks the results. Scenario 3 simulates a typical intermediated foreign exchange payment crossing 3 distinct currency ledgers. The latency metric shows that this multi-ledger transaction settled atomically in an average of just 11.7 seconds. Even in Scenario 8, a complex trade involving 8 active ledgers and 3 vehicle currencies, the settlement time averaged just 17 seconds. Compressing a multi-day settlement process into 17 seconds validates the underlying cryptographic model. The architecture does possess limitations. Specifically, a claim not provided error occurs if a hardware failure outlasts a time lock window, forcing a manual reclaim process to recover funds. There is also a privacy trade-off. Real-time on-chain visibility currently exposes transaction metadata to non-neighboring parties in the payment chain. Scaling this architecture to production will likely require integrating zero-knowledge proofs, a method for validating data without revealing the data itself, to encrypt public ledger metadata. These results are a starting point for addressing the fragmentation of global liquidity. These primitives suggest a path toward reconciling fragmented sovereign ledgers into an interoperable system that maintains autonomy while enabling atomic settlement.